Hi everyone, good afternoon. Sorry for the momentary difficulties. We're going to start our panel. We have an extremely dedicated, passionate group of individuals here. So if you could just go in a row, introduce yourselves, and tell us what got you into environmentalism, that would be great.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming here. I'm Armala Isles. I teach environmental science here at Madison College, so I'm hoping to see many of you in the next few years. And I got interested in environmentalism because I started looking into human health, and then as I was doing my studies, thinking more and more about health, it seemed like a lot of it was related to the environment, environmental justice, a lot of like equity issues, and so as I transitioned more from like medical or human health into environmental health. So.
Thanks. Hey, my name's Joe Parisi. I am the Dane County Executive, and when I was in high school, I had no idea what a county executive is, so I thought I would tell folks who don't know, it's basically similar. It's what a governor is to state government, what a mayor is to city government, a county executive is to county government. I'm the elected head of Dane County government, so really looking forward to chatting with you today.
Hey everyone, I'm Charles Hua. I am currently a policy analyst at Rewiring America, focused on accelerating building electrification and decarbonization policy at the federal, state, and local levels. But as I shared earlier today, I'm actually transitioning starting next week to the Department of Energy, helping develop the U.S. government strategy around grid modernization and offshore wind.
Hi, I'm Noemi, and I run a nonprofit called In Pursuit of Sunshine. We work on environmental education, both for high school students and for elementary school students. And I guess I got into environmentalism mainly with an interest in plants and animals. I really loved knowing all the different classifications of all the different plants and all the different animals. And then I figured out that there's a lot of impact on people, and a lot of people in my life were impacted. And so I went a different route, and yeah.
Hey everyone, it's great to see you all. I'm Encore Desai. I'm a professor of atmospheric and oceanic sciences at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and also an affiliate of the Center for Climatic Research in the Nelson Institute. And so broadly, I think about climate and how ecosystems and plants influence climate and weather, and how climate and weather influence ecosystems, including things like carbon sequestration, and a lot of questions right now about climate solutions using land systems. I'm not sure how I got into any of this, and so I'd love to see what you're all thinking about. But I have worked also in the past for the EPA in policy regulation. I worked for the Forest Service as a naturalist and interpreter. So I've kind of had a couple different careers. I've always liked the outdoors. And I think it was in college when I took this experimental class at the time on climate change, which was not a topic that was frequently taught. That was taught by an economist, a chemist, a geologist, and a philosopher together. And it really got me thinking a lot about the idea that there's a lot of really interesting things that we need to understand and do about addressing climate change right now. And that's kind of what got me going.
Thank you all so much for being here. So this workshop is mostly going to be a Q&A panel about any questions you might have about like your environment, the future, any career paths you might be interested in. So if anyone has any questions, we can start with that.
All right. What is the best way to start a career in environmental science?
Well, I'll start on this side, I guess, since I was last. That's a great question, right? I mean, I think one is you're already doing that by just being here, right? And being somebody who's engaged and wants to learn about the topic. Certainly, if you're thinking about, going to a four-year college and getting a degree where you want to think about careers in environmental sciences, that's one of our fastest growing majors at UW, as it is in a lot of colleges. And so there's quite a bit of opportunities, and it's worth asking questions about some of the schools you might be visiting or thinking about applying to, what their programs are like, what kind of career outcomes their students have, what classes are available. But be curious. I think maybe others might recommend, say, like volunteering at nonprofits and other things like that. But there are certainly a lot of directions. I teach right now, for example, and what I'm teaching right now is an introductory undergraduate global change class, right? And for students, they're mostly taking it because they need to meet some general education requirements, but it really is an introduction to climate change for these students. And many of them then decide to go on to take other classes afterwards. So trying to find some of those entry points where you can just get some exposure and interest, or do things like Akanksha, who was a science intern in my lab over the summer, and so that's another opportunity. In that case, this was through the Madison School District's summer science research internship program. That's another great way just to see, get your hands into research if that is an area you want to get into, and really trying to address and advance climate science from the perspective of research.
That's a great question. I would say environmental science isn't really my background or what I'm interested in currently, but I will say that there are a lot of teachers that are interested in helping out. And I think, especially with this conference and seeing how many teachers and professors and educators are here, I think reaching out to people in the community and trying to find somebody who's interested in giving you a couple hours on a Saturday or a little bit of extra time that they can just put into helping educate. And yeah, that's what we try to do with my nonprofit. So that's my advice.
What Professor Desai said pretty much. I mean, I think again, to reiterate, the fact that you all are here on a Saturday, I think speaks volumes to your interest and engagement around these topics already. I think beyond coursework and taking as many classes in environmental science, and by the way, this advice isn't really only for environmental science. It really applies if you're interested in environmental policy or environmental activism or environmental economics, or even something not environmental, like let's say you're interested in energy, engineering, whatever it is, this advice generally applies. There's a lot that you can learn, not even in a formal setting. So that's anything from just reading the news and being curious. And there's a lot of environmental and energy or climate focused newsletters and publications out there. Most of the big media outlets have these newsletters that you can subscribe to, and you might not understand everything always at the start. I certainly didn't when I first started on my kind of journey, just trying to soak as much information and knowledge in as I could. But over time, what that does is it helps you build a vocabulary and a language around these topics, particularly since these fields can be very technical and in some sense filled with jargon. Over time, you start to build a literacy around that, and then you start to understand what you're actually reading, and then you get to the level where you can actually synthesize and go deeper and analyze what you're reading and asking questions like, is this how things should be? How can I change the system? And speaking of systems, the other thing that I would say is it's super important to keep a systems thinking perspective. I actually think that that's something that the American K-12 education system doesn't really promote or foster in a meaningful way, which is what I mean by that in some sense is being able to see the big picture, draw the connections between what you're talking about and learning about in an environmental science class and how does that relate to a social studies class, and being able to understand how different systems, different components within a given system, et cetera, all interact with each other. So if you're interested in environmental science and you're trying to look at the biodiversity challenges that we're facing, you might also think about, well, how does political activism fit into that? And there is a relationship usually. And so being able to sort of have an orientation towards drawing those connections, I think is super valuable. But fundamentally, I would just say stay curious. That's the most important thing that you can do to really, get deeper into this stuff.
That's all really great advice. And since I'm not an environmental scientist, I think I will pass on this one for now because you all are much more tuned to this question. Sure.
Because I think they had some excellent options or opportunities. I got my start in grad school when I was encouraged to TA a class, and I did not want to speak in front of anybody, but it paid a stipend, which is nice. And so I did it, and it was an environmental science class. And so volunteering is a great option to get your foot in the door, but also don't shy away from seeking paid opportunities. Like paid internships like REUs are a great opportunity to get in the door, because they're not expecting you to come with a whole wealth of knowledge. They're expecting you to come in for the purpose of learning. And so internships can be a great way to figure out whether you like something or maybe you really don't like something. Also networking. I know it's kind of a, I don't know, not the most exciting word, but all the tablers that were downstairs, they have their own spheres of influence. And so writing your name down to sign up for their newsletters. One of the things that's been really cool in helping plan this conference is that it's just a really diverse group. We have a lot of young people, we have some retirees, we have people who are in industry, some people who are in education, some people who are in outreach. And so having all those different spheres of influence can help you maybe see what you might enjoy. And those people might have opportunities for either scholarships or jobs that might be of interest to you. And once you have that connection with them, then that can help build you towards those kinds of opportunities.
Those are all really great responses. Thank you so much. Does anyone have a question?
So I know we talked a lot about like networking this whole day kind of, because obviously it's like very important. So I've gone on like quite a few college tours, and that's like a huge theme as well as networking. Kind of like the bigger college you go to, the more networking you have, kind of sort of, you know, in a different way. So my question is like, if you went to college, like what college did you go to, and like do you think it made a difference in where you are today with the people you know today?
Technical. This is why I'm in environmental science and not audio visual. I went to a really tiny school. It had about 2,000 students in super rural Indiana. And so I wasn't exactly sure where that would lead me because it's not an impressive name. Like Taylor University, does anyone know besides you? You know Taylor University?
The basketball thing where they all fly it.
Oh my gosh, look at us. Famous Taylor University. Yeah. So small school, and sometimes when you're looking for jobs, it might say like, this person, we're looking for someone who has a master's in soil science. And my master's degree was in environmental science, and I took one soil class and one microbiology class and one hydrogeology class, and it was just like one of every little thing. And so sometimes I felt discouraged in looking for jobs because they seemed like they wanted someone who was coming in with like one specific thing. But I ended up getting hired actually at UW, and that's why I moved to Madison, in the plant pathology department. And I think part of why I didn't feel disadvantaged going to a smaller school that that one person knew about, is because of that whole curiosity aspect. Like when I was in my classes, I like talked to my teachers a lot and probably bothered them more than they wanted to be bothered. I looked for all the little like extra opportunities, things to do on campus, and I think that helped me get really good recommendation letters. Like I had some people even tell me, Michael Giebert gave you an amazing recommendation letter. Like I've never seen one like that. So being in a smaller context can help you find opportunities that might be harder in a small school. You might not get as lost in some ways that you might in a larger school. So that's kind of from the small school perspective. Don't feel like if you're in a small school, you're going to end up in, I don't know, somewhere small or rural. And probably the same way, like if you're at a larger school and you want to work in a smaller sector, I don't think that is necessarily a factor that will exclude you from switching from large to small or small to large.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree. I think there are advantages and disadvantages to all, and it's I don't know that you can even plan on which one is going to be better, right? Personally, I started out here. Well, I was mentioning to these guys, I took a very untraditional path toward someone who's in elected office. I quit high school when I was 17. For all of you who are in high school here, please don't do that. Don't go home and tell your parents that Joe Parisi said, hey, quit high school. Didn't take long to realize that was like the biggest mistake I ever made, but by then it was too late. So I ended up taking my GED, and then I started taking classes at MATC. I'm so old, back when it was downtown. And for me, that really gave me the self-confidence, because I was a non-traditional student and it was a smaller class size. It was almost like being in high school. For me, that small kind of atmosphere and environment was really critical, and it really helped give me the confidence to move on. I too couldn't stand to speak in front of people. I was terrified of public speaking, and now I do it every day for a living, because you just tackle those fears. And then eventually I transferred to UW-Madison, and I graduated UW-Madison with a degree in sociology. And so there were the benefits to the smaller school for me, for sure, but then the benefits of being in Madison was my passion was public policy and politics. And my last semester of sociology here, I got an internship in the state capitol working as a legislative aide. And that was kind of my door, cracking the door open to the path that I had never really planned on. This is certainly nothing I, knew I was going to do forever, but that kind of opened up an opportunity for me to check out that thing that I was always drawn to, and from there it led to where I am today. So, yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I kind of touched on this in terms of the stay curious aspect. I love learning, as nerdy as that sounds. I really genuinely enjoy learning about a range of topics. And in college, for me, I was fortunate to both go deeper into climate and energy issues that I was already passionate about. So I took a course on environmental economics. I took a course on renewable energy policy. I took a course on environmental law. So I was able to go deep in that, but I also try to take a wide range of courses outside of the environmental topics. So I got a chance to take this class on the future of cultural space, which was really cool. Like, what does the future of restaurants and public libraries and parks look like? And that opened my mind and my ways of seeing the world and thinking about things in a different way. And even though that class wasn't about climate change, it did shape how I think about a lot of things. Like, what are the, you can think about that both literally, like in terms of the built environment. What does that look like in the context of a reimagined, climate resilient and a future that promotes climate mitigation, to the more like theoretical, like how do we reshape our societal institutions to and how do we more proactively plan for what a future looks like? So anyways, that's just an example. For me, I think one of the most valuable things that I found from college, well, there's a lot of things. One is just the people that I was surrounded by. It's just awesome being around friends, classmates, professors, advisors, mentors, grad students, etc., that are really passionate in general. But also I think just like being in an environment where there's a lot of ideas exchange is super important as well. Like, I think the beauty of like a college campus is that it is a concentrated space where it's not only encouraged, but it's the mandate for everybody there to be talking about ideas and promoting ideas and thinking about research and asking questions and trying to tackle some of society's greatest problems. And I think that to me was just awesome, as being in that environment where I could learn about a range of things and exchange ideas and challenge myself, challenge my thinking, change my viewpoints on various things. And so I'm very grateful for that.
I would say that I'm in college, so I'm about halfway done. I'm a sophomore. And I think that I came from high school and I was really interested in networking. And I got to high school I got to college, and I think everything kind of changed. I had issues, I guess, with mental health and kind of reaching out to people, and I struggled a lot. But I think that reaching out to professors and even just shooting people emails or showing up at a club event, or I don't know, anything that your college is putting on will make it seem like it's a much more connected space, because I don't think it necessarily is the smaller or the larger or the size of the college. It's more of just the being able to connect with people, and somebody's going to be the person that will open the door for more and more opportunities. And I think that if you're somebody who has a lot of opportunities or is really great at doing that, I think also making sure that you hold the door open for other people to also have those opportunities.
Yeah, those are great remarks there. I'll just mention that, back to your question specifically of networking and thinking about, how you might do that in college. I think maybe a theme you might have heard here is that it doesn't actually really matter where you go to college as much as what you make of it while you're there, right? And this idea of finding the doors and spaces and places where you have the opportunity, and you might find yourself that you fit better or feel better in a smaller school. I went to a very small school. I went to a school of 2,500 students, Oberlin College in Ohio. But the nice thing about that was that the environmental studies program was really, really broad because there was no single department per se that could teach all of the classes. And so I ended up taking classes in economics and chemistry and philosophy and geology, while also doing a computer science double major. And that really kind of gave me the breadth that's been really, really helpful. Because one of the other things I'm thinking about is that no matter what you major in, there's going to be some or what you choose for a career. Climate change is going to either affect that career or major, or you are going to be affecting it. And it doesn't matter whether that's real estate or finance or computer science or anything. And so, like, whatever you choose, having that in your mind, right? We don't know what the jobs 2 decades from now are going to look like that you're going to be leading into. I have no idea. I don't train students for specific jobs, with the exception of weather forecasters, because we apparently always need them. Really thinking about how do you get the skills you need by finding interesting opportunities. So as a small school, I didn't have research opportunities, but I did have lots of one-on-one interactions with faculty. At a large university where I teach at, that can be a little harder. But even then, you might find, like, my major only has 60 majors, which means I know almost all of the undergraduates. And a lot of them do research with us. And I think if you're looking at a large school and there's a specific major like that, reach out to the major. Like, the campus tour is really just marketing. But if you actually go to the major, right, so if you so I'm department chair of atmospheric science, so I do some of these tours with high schoolers and families, and you'll get a lot more useful information about what it would actually be like to study here in that program.
Much. Does anyone have a question?
I was wondering, like, what would a typical day in your career look like?
I get to hang out with awesome students. So for my job as, like, a college professor, I have 2 classes that I mainly do, typically about 15 to 17 contact hours, like chatting with students or teaching classes in lecture or lab, and the rest of it is grading. No, not really, but there is a lot of grading. There's also a lot of creativity with environmental education, because I feel like, I give a lecture and then afterwards I usually think, what landed well, what didn't land well, kind of trying to make it more relevant or more engaging. So yeah, most of my time is that. And education has been really great for me because I don't want to be with people all the time. And it's a perfect mix of being with people and then also doing work on my own.
So there's no such thing as a typical day in my job. It's a challenging question sometimes, and I get asked that. But I oversee a very large organization, about 30 departments, 2,500 employees, close to a $900 million annual budget. And we do everything. We have an airport, a zoo, a highway department, a land and water resources department, so it really runs the gambit. But I think perhaps looking at kind of the climate side, right? So there may be a couple quick aspects I can look at. What we've done is, we're really proud. We're the first county government in the state of Wisconsin and only the fourth in the nation to offset 100% of the electricity we use with renewable energy. So we decided this was something that was a priority for us and for our community. So, I mean, a lot went into it, but basically what we had to do, for example, to achieve that goal was first do an inventory, how much are we using, do an assessment of all of the buildings and facilities and the ways that we use energy in Dane County, both electricity and other types of energy. Then we, say, okay, we look at the things that people know are the most efficient ways to go about things. First, we looked at opportunities for energy efficiency, and we proposed budgets that allocated $2 million a year toward energy efficiency. Then we worked with partners and community partners and our staff to assess all of the facilities that Dane County government owns, and we assessed those for their ability to accept solar, and we started deploying solar. When we ran out of buildings to put solar on, we started assessing land. We had to do the math, do the work. How much more do we have to offset? And we developed in partnership with local utilities some utility scale programs to offset electricity. Now that's not a day, but a typical day would be pulling all of those various partners together, all of the internal staff, looking at the funding mechanisms, working with advocates to help advocate for this if there's pushback by any folks. So a lot of interacting with people, a lot of coalition building, a lot of really nuts and bolts hard work. I think sometimes when we think about how government is involved in, say, climate policy, we might think of the big headline stuff, right? Like the Inflation Reduction Act and the Clean Air Act from years ago and passing major legislation, which is extremely important. That's policy. But when you're, especially on more of the local level and like some of the stuff Charles is going to be working on for sure, there's the implementation of policy, right? There's the nuts and bolts stuff that we have to do to make the change that we want to see. And so when you get more to the local government side of things, it's actually almost a little bit more like running a business and having multiple meetings, but meetings only with a purpose whose goal is action, not meetings just to have meetings, which sometimes people can fall into. Yeah, hopefully that can give you a little insight into what some of the things we do, and that's just in the climate side of things.
What does a day in life look like? Wake up, shower, eat breakfast sometimes. Similarly, I feel like my days are very different in part because, like, in addition to my day job, I proactively, climate change is what is just constantly on my mind, admittedly, and this is the single issue that I care most about and I'm extremely passionate about. And so I try to find opportunities and ways to get involved even beyond my sort of quote-unquote day job. Maybe let's start there. So I think usually what I do is, like, I have a morning kind of routine where I read a bunch of news and newsletters on climate and energy issues and how things are going, what's progressing, what's not, et cetera. And I find that to be a very grounding thing to do for me at the start. Like, I usually spend about an hour doing that. And it just helps me feel like I know what's going on around me and have a literacy behind what some of the opportunities and challenges are for the work that I'm doing. During my day job itself, maybe instead of talking about this sort of future role with the Department of Energy, I'll just talk about Rewiring America. It's a nonprofit, and a lot of it is, a lot of the work that I'm doing is putting together kind of research and policy memos that then go out to anyone from the county executives of the world to sometimes even the White House or the Department of Energy. But putting together these memos, having meetings with different stakeholders. So in our case, that could be anything from another environmental advocacy group to maybe a utility company to maybe a regulator, an energy regulator. And so it very much depends, but usually coordinating with these different stakeholders, and oftentimes it's advocating for something. So pushing for climate legislation or a policy or regulation or whatever that looks like. And so that's what my day job looks like. Like I said, I try to get involved in my community outside of that work as well. So I serve on a couple environmental boards. So there might be work that I need to do there in terms of strategic planning for what a nonprofit organization should be focusing its attention and resources on in terms of climate or decarbonization or whatever that looks like. And I'm also a research affiliate with Berkeley National Lab. And as part of my work there, I do a lot of kind of data-driven research, analysis, et cetera, a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of that type of stuff on various climate and energy policy questions. And then I go to sleep, usually. So, yeah.
I would say that I don't have a normal day. I think that I have classes throughout the day because I'm a student, but I also, I guess, nonprofit-wise, there's a lot of times when we have a lot going on, like when we're in a project and we're working on a project, and when we are in the middle of summer and we have to work on our community gardens, and then there's a lot of days when we just don't have anything going on, and it's a lot of normal things like having dishes to wash and not washing the dishes and then thinking about that. But I think it's a lot of trying to keep up connections and kind of acting like a bumblebee and kind of just visiting all the different parts of the connections that you work on and making sure that you're maintaining a network and just working with a lot of people and making sure that everybody still feels like they're valued within the nonprofit. And I think that is sometimes very stressful, and sometimes it's the best thing about my job. And I think that is the best thing about my job, is making sure that I can work with people and continue out to work on the mission.
So Armilla kind of already talked about the job of a professor from the perspective of working with students and teaching. And probably one thing that's different about our two jobs is, for me, the research side of my job is a larger component, but that still involves working with students. And so I tend to think of it broadly. So professors, right? First, we have to get PhDs to be able to teach in higher education, which means I didn't get out of school until I was 30. But you essentially get paid as an apprentice scientist, either as a teaching or research assistant, to work your way through that. I view myself as a researcher as having three really core skills that I need to do, and that's kind of what defines what I do in most of my day, right? I view myself first and foremost as a writer. Scientists are writers, right? We are writers about nature using systematic observations. So my writing and communication skills are kind of one of the core of what I view, what I do most of my day. I write papers, I teach classes, I communicate with students. That goes to the second thing I do, which is mentoring, right? So I have a research lab. I have a team of graduate students, undergraduates, sometimes a high schooler, and other staff who I have to also raise the funds for. So I need to, because I pay the salaries of all of my graduate students and researchers and their health benefits and their tuition, which means I need to bring in about $500,000, $2 million, or $2 million a year from mostly federal agencies. So I do a lot of fundraising, writing for proposals for research. And then my third thing is really that data analysis and coding skills. So really being able to take the experiments we're doing and really make sense of the data, either by doing lots of analysis, right, or teaching others how to do that, or being able to kind of come up with the methodology for how to do that. And so that's where that computer science skills of mine still comes in handy every day. If you want to get into science research, there's no shortage of the amount of math and coding skills and writing skills that you should pick up. In terms of my everyday, it varies a lot, right? I teach a class, but most of my day is spent kind of in the research setting. So I'll just tell you the last few days what I did, right? So on Thursday, I had a meeting with a pile of potato farmers because they fund research that we're doing trying to understand water shortages from irrigation into central sands, and they fund research on their farms. And so I met with them about planning the next stage of their research. I then met with another team of researchers where we had a new grant from UW where we're setting up some measurements over something called agrovoltaics in Stoughton, about 20 minutes away from here, working with Alliant Energy, trying to understand how can we do renewable energy and farming on the same property and whether that is how that affects the ecosystem. That's our research question. I then met with the next day, Friday, I had taught my class on undergraduate climate change, and then I met with my research lab to talk about some projects that each of them are working on. Spent some time doing some coding and data analysis for the measurements I was making. And I'm here today. I consider this part of my job. My job is research, teaching, and service outreach as kind of components of what I do. And on Monday, I'm flying out to Germany to work with the European Commission on their greenhouse gas observing system because I chair their advisory board. And so a group of us as scientists will spend some time talking about how they're making their carbon observing measurements in fossil fuels, atmosphere, land, and ocean, and giving them advice on how to improve that, which I do once a year. So those are what I did in the last 3 days.
Responses. Now, unfortunately, we only have 5 minutes left. So, okay. One quick question. I think we can make it. We have a little time. Yeah.
So, as I said earlier this morning, I'm a gap year student, so I'm trying to just find resources to learn more about the environment and climate change and also environmental careers. So, because we don't have much time, this can be a quick one. Could each of you give any books, newsletters, as you said, or any kind of resources, websites that I could or anyone could learn more about anything related to the environment, whether that be careers or the science?
I can start if folks don't. I'll give you one that might sound unusual. So one of the things that some jobs you might not think of as like working on climate initially really might. So I would say go to the Dane County government webpage, countyofdane.com. Look at the Land and Water Resources Department. Look at the Office of Energy and Climate Change. See if there's anything else. Because within a lot of these departments, there are a lot of jobs that work directly with the environment in local government, say in county government. We do prairie restoration, which restores prairies and is good for the ecosystem and sequesters carbon. We do a lot of work with cleaning up our lakes, and Kathy's Department of Energy and Climate Change does obviously a lot of work in energy and climate. So I would say look at local governments and see what kind of different things they're into. There are a lot of career paths there.
I can go next. So I mentioned newsletters. So you can pick your favorite publication. They probably have either a newsletter or a column talking about climate change and environmental issues. So for me, I read the New York Times Climate Forward. Washington Post has a Climate 202 newsletter. That's what they call it. I'm also very interested in the policy side. So Politico has a ton of content around energy, climate, environmental issues, etc. Podcasts, I think, can be very great as well. So there are podcasts dedicated to just talking about pathways and careers in climate. There's one by the Environmental Defense Fund. I think it's called Climate Corps, CORPS. You might be able to check that out. There are other podcasts like A Matter of Degrees that Leah Stokes, my actual current boss, Leah, hosts. In addition to that, let's see. I mean, I think there's most high schoolers get their information on Snapchat and TikTok now. So you could do that. I'm not necessarily saying that's the best source, but if that is the case for you, that's where you get most of your information. You should definitely go beyond that, I would say, to some of the things that I said. And it comes down to what learning styles you have, what types of information and mediums do you like. So for me, I really like audio and visual. So podcasts and videos are super helpful. I also like reading. I guess I like all of them, but figure out what it is that like really resonates with you, and there's almost certainly going to be an abundance of resources and information there.
I would say that for our nonprofit, we kind of built our network by using social media and finding certain organizations, just following them on Instagram, such as like Sustain Dane, and I can't think of other ones right now, but just following them and kind of looking at their sponsors and continuing to kind of go down the chain.
Yeah, I'll actually make a plug for social media because there actually is quite a bit of activity. There is also, of course, a lot of dumpster fires and everything else in between, and misinformation and disinformation. But in many ways, if you want to be a climate activist or you want to be somebody who is on the forefront of climate, it's useful to know that conversation, and including in some ways you should challenge yourself to read things you disagree with strongly. Like as much as reading the New York Times Climate Forward is interesting, you should also read the Wall Street Journal editorial page. You should also look at places that have very different perspectives on energy and fossil fuels, because it will strengthen your arguments. It will make you understand where people are coming from. As climate scientists, a lot of us are very active on Twitter and X, and some of us are moving to Blue Sky and other places, but if you follow Catherine Hayhoe, she is the chief scientist of the Nature Conservancy. She has a list called Scientists Who Do Climate, and it has a lot of really good people and some other terrible people like me on it. But it has a lot of people who are real working everyday climate scientists who are on the forefront of, hey, what are cool things happening right now? And the same thing on Instagram. So another plug for Nature Conservancy, and only because I'm on their board, but it's they do a lot of volunteer activities, right, where you can go out and go set prairie on fire, right, and they need people to come on hikes and things like that. And those are really fun activities just to meet people, right? Just go out for a day, go for a hike, right? Go learn about some plants that are local to you. Go explore. There's lots of organizations, and especially around here, there's no shortage of organizations that, Nomi's her own, but. Yeah, I think that's her list. Yeah, that she has on Twitter X. It's a little bit out of date because there has been an exodus of folks from that platform. But it's still pretty active, and then some folks have moved up to TikTok or Instagram as well, and so you can kind of find them there. So I say don't shy away from social media necessarily, because like if I have a new paper or finding, the very first place I write about it is on Twitter. Before it even goes out to my university press release. So,
Brings us to the end of our workshop. Can we give our panelists a big round of applause? Thank you all so much for being here. If you have any questions, you can reach out there. There will be an updated version of this recording on the website, on the 2023 conference, the Connection Dane website, probably sometime tomorrow, and I'll try to send out the list of the information that they just gave. So thank you all so much for being here. There's a 10-minute break before the next workshop, so